Hello, everyone. Good morning, good day, good afternoon. My name is Spencer, and I will be continuing day 5 of reading the translation of Parichay, a transcript from a talk by A. Nagaraji of Amarkantak, India. And today is my last day for reading. I have 12 pages to complete. And after myself, Naomi will continue the next section of the reading. So I will start today from the end of page 49, and I will begin from there. Many things, Nagaraj continues to highlight the importance of orderly living, and in order for achieving orderly living, for accomplishing right understanding. So this theme, this thread continues throughout, and I have already spoken quite a bit on this. So many things are a little bit repeated. And then at the end of this section, he begins to explain a little bit about the activities of jivan, of self-consciousness. And so, and I will not touch too much on that either, because Naomi will be taking that up in the coming days. So today I will be reading these pages. My pace might be a little bit quicker as to complete this section. And also it has been suggested that I share a little bit about my personal experience having met A. Nagaraj and staying at his place a number of years back. And I will be very glad to share my experiences with that. It was wonderful. So let's get on with it. Like I said, end of page 49. I will start from there. Without understanding something, one cannot accept it for living. My own case can illustrate this point. My family, my neighbors, and my village were full of Vedic scholars, but they could not make me study in school because I had no interest in it. However, every human being on this earth wants to become wise. On this basis, I can say there is most definitely the possibility that every human being can become wise. I started observing this movement only after observing this tendency towards understanding in the human being. The goal of this movement is to make every human being on earth wise. As a result of the efforts thus far, those who have attained the understanding have found relief, and such qualities have arisen in them which we call humane. The essence of ethics is devoting one's resources, i.e., body, mind, and wealth, for the sake of human purpose. This is also called as good use. Good use occurs in two situations. One, for production and seva. Two, for fulfilling the innate purpose of relationships. That which is put to good use becomes protected, and that for which the good use was done also becomes protected. This is the meaning of protection and good use. When we use our resources in the form of body, mind, and wealth for the universal human purpose, resolution, prosperity, fearlessness, and coexistential orderliness, those resources become protected. There is no protection without good use, and there is no good use without protection. Protection combined with good use results in eternal good. There is a need in us human beings to devote our body, mind, and wealth towards righteousness for the sake of our awakening. If there is a unit in existence that could be wise, then it is the human being. The human being is a combined expression of jivan and body. The body is hereditary, while jivan is in the form of a constitutionally complete atom that exists naturally and without any human contribution. The human body is the contribution of human tradition. The union of Jivan with body is only for the purpose of evidencing awakening. There is no mode provisioned for evidencing Jivan's awakening through animal bodies. Therefore, we can understand that human being is a unit of sanskar inheritance order. The orders in nature, apart from human being, are mutually complementary. Now the need has come for the human being to become complementary to the other orders. Orderly living is only possible for human beings in the form of complementariness, which cannot result from individualism or consumerism. Idealism and materialism, as the prior lines of human thinking, resulted in making the human being individualistic. Materialism results in human beings becoming consumerist and thereby individualistic. On the other hand, the one who is pursuing idealistic detachment is necessarily individualistic. In this way, both thoughts, idealism and materialism, could not give a formula for the formation of society, and instead these proved to be against it. The truth, however, is that every human being wants to live as part of society. They want to live with prosperity. They want to live resolved lives. It is the human being's responsibility to fulfill their inherent purpose of resolution, prosperity, fearlessness, and coexistence. So just pause there quickly. So just going back up to what has been read, one important point that Nagaraj brings, and it's a new concept thus far, is of protection and right use. He says that whatever we put to right use becomes protected, and whatever we protect gets right used. So I believe what's being said here is that if I mentioned yesterday that that I'm not at home right now. I'm actually in another state, and this is a very farming oriented area, and you can see the different types of farming that's going on here. So what I've noticed is that just even surrounding this area, a lot of the farmers, they're using the soil for the sake of their livelihood, for the sake of profit. So whenever you use the soil and it's not being used for, human beings' innate purpose, which is, ensuring harmony and balance in the family, all the way up to with the environment, and instead it's being used for a more narrow means, just for getting an income or getting a profit, then you will misuse the soil. And it's quite evident that this is happening in this area, because the mentality is not for, how can I engage with the land? How can I use the soil for ensuring balance among all four orders, human, matter, plant, animal, and human, but rather it's devoted towards more narrow ends, which is how can I get earn some livelihood or earn a profit from this. And Nagaraji has another formula, which is you will lose whatever you misuse. So if it's not being used for the whole, then necessarily it's being used for just part or a small section, which is maybe myself, my family. And eventually you will lose that thing. And these are limited resources. So you will lose whatever you misuse. And if you right use, then it becomes protected. If you understand how to take care of the soil, then it becomes protected, it becomes insured, it becomes enriched, and human being becomes complementary to it. And thus its continuity is ensured. And you can give any number of examples about protection and right use. When you right use something, when you use it for the well-being of the family, of the society, and of the whole earth, then it continues. And it seems a little bit obvious because it's very natural. You take care of it and it will remain. If you don't take care and you abuse it, then one day it will be gone. So that's about protection and good use. And then Yeah, he does. Going down, Nagraji talks about, how the previous tradition of materialism has resulted in individualism. And that's simply because, we're all, in terms of body, we're all very unique. Each body is different. We have our different tastes, our preferences. And without understanding the continuous aspect of human being and how to find fulfillment in self, how to find a lasting happiness, then we simply go for finding fulfillment in the temporary aspects of life, which is food, clothing, shelter, and there is an accumulation out of fear, out of fear of what happens next. And so with this accumulation and simply going based on what feels good for me, well, what feels good for me is different to what feels good for the next person. And so necessarily we branch off into our separate paths. We take a more individualized approach, simply because there's no commonality in what I necessarily like and what you like. And even if we find something common, then as you go further, you'll find it branches there as well. So materialism leads to an individualistic approach, and he says that idealism, a spiritual approach, also just by its very nature is individualistic. It's for my own salvation, right? So how can I attain heaven or God? And it's just primarily dedicated focus on my relationship with a higher being or God. So both have made human being individualistic, whereas we really desire to be social, to be part of society. But for that, we need the right mentality. We need one that makes us social in behavior, social in our mentality, and that is being proposed as a worldview of coexistence. So I will continue reading from there. The responsibility naturally follows the right understanding. As we take to responsible living, we naturally become orderly in family, and thereby become social. As a result, we evidence the universal conduct of human being. Humankind needs such a magnificent tradition. Every human being has the want of orderliness. It is there in each and every human being as an aspiration as well. I think the human being has its desire as well, but this desire is lower in priority than many other desires. This desire, not being strong enough, does not turn into action, and as a result, one remains incapable of committing to it. Human being becomes helpless due to animal consciousness. Therefore, what should be done? We should make those people proficient who are ready to understand right now, and through them implement humanistic education in the educational institutions, and instill sanskar in children. As sanskar gets instilled in children, their homes and families will naturally undergo a transformation. This exemplifies the need for humanization of education, which is the second plan. The units of material order, biological order, and animal order are complementary to human being. Humankind, however, is undecided as of yet with regard to the question of whether to become complementary to other orders of nature. This gap needs to be filled, as only then we will get the evidence of human beings living in the universal orderliness of existence. The aims of Jivan are happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss. When Jivan or consciousness aims are accomplished, then the human being's aims are also accomplished. The aims of human being are resolution, prosperity, fearlessness, and coexistential orderliness. When the human being's aims are accomplished, Jivan's aims are also accomplished. Resolution equals happiness. We experience happiness wherever we have become resolved. and we suffer wherever we are unresolved. Thereafter, as we live in family while evidencing resolution and prosperity, we experience peace. We experience contentment upon living in the orderliness. We experience bliss upon evidencing right understanding. In this way, if we can produce evidence of resolution, prosperity, fearlessness, and coexistential orderliness, then the right understanding will keep flowing into the human tradition, and we will experience happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss. Jivan has inexhaustible forces and powers. Therefore, upon its accomplishing resolution, Jivan keeps expressing and evidencing resolution in human living, and it remains in the state of fulfillment. Jivan is a force in the state of being, and it is a power in the state of motion. The Jivan activities in the state of motion become evidenced in the mutuality of one another, while the realization happens in their state of being. As we taste, we realize whether or not we became fulfilled from it. As we evaluate, we realize whether or not we discovered the truth from it. Further on, we realize upon direct perception of truth and contemplate based on understanding or bodh from that realization. The truth thus discovered becomes the basis of our scrutinizing self for its purpose. This self-scrutiny has to be done. There is no other way. Fulfillment at these 5 levels of Jivan itself is the way to lasting happiness, which we also call as happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss. This fulfillment in Jivan at its 5 levels becomes evident as self-governance in human living. Self-governance is the embodiment of magnificence of the human being upon their realization of humanness. Self-governance is orderly living of humankind in a self-inspired way. Humane conduct itself is the embodiment of self-governance. This magnificence of human awakening is in making their relationships meaningful and realizing values in family, society, nature, and human-made systems. We can come to trust in the ever-presence of existence only while making our relationships meaningful and experience the values therein. We can't live in the ever-presence of existence until we recognize purpose or meaning in our relationships. Unable to see relationships, we do not live in the ever-presence of existence. We go to the past, but the past has no presence. We cannot live in the past. We think of the future, but the future too has no presence. In this way, human being doesn't find any anchor in life and keeps wandering listlessly. No one wants to wander listlessly, but the current fragmented traditions do not have any provision for showing the direction and goal to human being. Every human being, upon achieving the right understanding from consciousness development, value education, can become living evidence of truth and be part of its tradition. The right understanding can come into every human being's conduct, which is the essence of humanness. The magnificence of human being arises only when they evidence the right understanding in their conduct. It is with this greatness that human beings can make their tradition with continuity of happiness. Humans can achieve balance in their way of living with animal world, plant world, and mineral world, making their use and good use while being grateful for their complementariness. Every human being can become imbued with purpose upon the onset of right understanding. In order to live harmoniously with other human beings, one must recognize purpose in relationships, fulfill the values therein, perform evaluation, and experience mutual fulfillment. Fulfillment is our natural preference. It is in hope of fulfillment that human being moves towards evidencing resolution, prosperity, and trust in the ever-presence of existence and coexistential orderliness in their lives. Existence itself is the highest truth. Existence itself is eternal. Existence is in the form of coexistence. Coexistence is always in effect. And this results in development, progression, and development, and then expression of consciousness. The atoms in development progression exhibit continuous activity, while they remain part of physiochemical things. The number of Jivan atoms is determined by way of existential orderliness. The human being has no role in deciding that. The four orders in existence have come into being in the same way. The human being have failed to evidence complementariness to the rest of nature, and instead have only been exploiting it. How can the human being imagine their happiness arising out of exploitation of nature? All nations, all sects, all religions, and all families believe that their happiness is achievable from the exploitation of nature. Science too propagates the idea that human beings can preserve their lot only through struggle and exploitation, offering up the slogans like "might is right" and "survival of the fittest." A nation is considered more developed if it can wage more wars, make more profit, and exploit nature to a greater degree. In reality, a developed nation is that which has become awakened and is orderly and resolved and prosperous and self-assured, and that has become aligned to the coexistential orderliness. So just stopping briefly there, I think it's a very nice section here. Just one thing I want to just clarify towards the beginning there was he was talking about the aims of Jivan, or the aims of life and consciousness, as happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss. So that's an important concept, and I think what it's saying there is that when you live with resolution, when human being evidences resolution in their lives, then the inner experience which they have, or the experience which self has, is happiness. And when we live with prosperity, resolution, and prosperity in our families, then the experience that we have is peace. And when we live with trust in the society, there is a contentment. And lastly, when there is a coexistence among all four orders of nature, then we experience bliss. So he's just adding this extra concept here to show that, self's goals, or the experience of satisfaction and happiness in self, is in alignment with human being when we live that way. So living in a harmonious way, naturally we get the experience and accomplish the fulfillment that we're looking for inside as well, or as our own experience, we become fulfilled. And he does mention that we're all seeking fulfillment. We would like to see that in our lives. So just going down here. Yeah, he mentions that he believes that we all have the want for orderly living, and we also have the desire for it as well. Desire being a little bit stronger urge for it, but unfortunately that gets suppressed. Through our lives, we forget about it, or it doesn't get nurtured properly, like a seed which does not get watered. So it is there, but slowly it gets buried, it gets dried up, and we lose confidence, that we can live orderly, or that is a desire in us. So the want is definitely there. It's everyone can agree, but the desire has unfortunately been been buried under the desire for many other things, to get a particular job, to travel here, to accomplish this. So it's worth exploring in ourselves, how strong is that desire for orderly living. Only then we can move in the direction of right understanding. And again, he discusses how, somehow we have this idea that we will be successful by exploiting nature, and it really doesn't make sense. Somehow we think that once we demolish or we are able to consume the resources or the natural abundance, then we will become fulfilled. It's really like that picture, someone who's sitting on the tree branch and they're sawing off the same branch on which they're sitting. It's our life support. It's us. It's human being is just one part of this whole natural beauty. So we're really kicking ourselves when we are exploiting. It'll be tough to find happiness through exploiting. Its provision is not there, actually. Only when we live well with everything will our happiness arise. And I do like the point in which he says, thus far a developed nation is one which consumes more, one which can fight more, whereas he's proposing that a developed nation is actually one which can become prosperous, live well with others, live well with the environment. You would call this as developed, not one which is just bulldozing the rest, or consuming very quick. So it's good, something very, very important to consider. How do we see development? How do we see progress? And that perhaps we can consider it in a different way, right? So let's continue. There is difference in the way that the Jivan understands itself and the way it understands existence. We recognize material things by experimenting with them, with regard to their usefulness. Usefulness is in the terms of the human's needs and aspirations. The human needs are objects of food, shelter, and utilities. The human aspirations are objects of transportation and telecommunication. Most of these things have been identified. Their production has been figured out, and those have mostly become accessible to everyone, albeit for profit, through commerce. The commerce is always in the anticipation of profit. Upon having acquired the right understanding, it is on the basis of analysis activity in Jivan itself that we can identify all of the things that we require. And once we know our requirements, we can do their production and thereby experience prosperity. As we experience prosperity along with resolution, we become orderly in our living. Therefore, we need to first make our students self-reliant by imparting them the right understanding. This will beget the tendency in them to evidence that understanding in their families, and after that participate in the universal orderliness. It is human beings' great fortune to have the opportunity of evidencing themselves at these three levels. The human being's need and inquiry for right understanding is the only basis for their realizing this fortune. If such a need arises in the human being, then it would be easy for them to evidence themselves by studying this proposal attentively. We tried finding answers to the questions: what is right understanding? What is the entity that understands? What is the content of right understanding? The entity that understands is Jivan itself. The content of right understanding is existence, Jivan, and humane conduct. Understanding existence involves understanding the development and it involves understanding the physical and chemical formation, deformation in the existence. The physical and chemical formation, deformation activities are present as material order and biological order in existence. All of these entities are continuously undergoing change from one form to another. For example, trees and plants dry up after a while and take the form of soil. This is called transformation. This transformation process is continuous in the physiochemical world. In the same way, the bodies of animals and humans get formed in the womb, and when they die, their bodies transform into soil, air, and water. In the human being, Jivan is the only entity which understands. Jivan, or consciousness, as an entity always remains constant. The existence is understood by Jivan and human being. It's understood in the form of coexistence only. It is only with the coexistential outlook that we become capable of orderly living in every situation. Orderly living is the aim of the human being. Orderly living itself is happiness. The problems from disorderly living result in the suffering of Jivan. The suffering of Jivan results in its exploring for resolution. Jivan has an inherent tendency to explore continuously. Not just Jivan, this continuous exploration is present in the insentient atoms only, which itself is the cause of transformation in the physiochemical world. Everywhere in nature, there is a tendency to explore for getting into the coexistential orderliness. The atomic particles, too, due to this tendency, keep constituting in the form of atoms. The atoms, for the same reason, keep constituting in the form of molecules. The molecules, due to the same tendency, keep constituting in the form of molecular bodies. In this way, human being can understand the presence of the infinite planets and celestial bodies in existence. The diversity in the insentient nature is basically due to differences in the number of particles constituting the insentient atoms. These distinct atomic types, established as definite statuses in nature, are the basis of diversity in their compositions. For example, many kinds of vegetation are basically many compositions of distinct atomic types. These compositions and their constituting elements are established statuses in nature with innate purpose of participating in the coexistential orderliness. The substance making these compositions is also a magnificence of being in coexistence. Entire existence is present, evident, and radiant on the basis of this magnificence. The human being is also a part of in this very existence, inseparable from coexistence. Human being cannot run away from coexistence. The more they tried to run away, the more miserable they became. Every human being wants to be resolved in their mind. The exploration for it is present in every human being. Humans have the natural right to explore orderliness around and about them. It is when they realize that all their living is based on whatever they could find from their exploration, they will understand the meaning of free will. It is clear that a happy life is the sole objective of human beings' exploration. The way to becoming happy is only one: realization of Jivan's objective and human beings' objective. Right understanding results in Jivan's realization of its objective. Jivan, upon becoming fulfilled, sustains human beings' aims of resolution, prosperity, fearlessness, and coexistential orderliness. This itself is the evidence of orderly living. Orderliness in humankind provisions realization of these four aims in every human being. Such a human tradition would have beneficence for one another. Imparting the right understanding to another itself is beneficence, or upkar, whereby coexistence gets actualized in the form of human tradition. Orderliness is to ensure presence of coexistence in the human tradition. If anything happens against coexistence, then it gives rise to disturbance in the order. Human being in delusion can cause any kind of disturbance due to their imagination and free will. Their disturbing the natural balance of the earth is its evidence. Human beings were ignorant about consequences of their actions, and when they came to know, it had become too late. It is due to their imagination and free will that human being always remains engaged in search and exploration. The search and exploration becomes successful only when these are for discovering the order in existence, when these are for achieving resolution, prosperity, trust, and coexistential orderliness. So just taking a pause. There will not be so much to explain in this section. Again, I think just if I were to get a common thread traveling through all what Nagaraji has been saying is just really highlighting the importance of understanding and thus leading to orderly living. And just from many different angles, he's giving examples. So just to clarify within ourselves that yes, we want to live orderly. We have the possibility to live orderly, and that comes from our right understanding. How do we see the world, right? And how are we seeing ourselves, and how are we seeing existence, nature, and how are we seeing our place in it? When we develop a view of coexistence, when we see our relationships all around us, and we work to fulfill these relationships, then orderly living naturally results. And it is our desire, any exploitation or any injustice is not desirable for us. These things happen because we don't have the right mindset, and as we have not received the right education to see things that way. So in many different ways, Nagraj is hammering this point, just that the need to live orderly, and for that, the need to understand properly. So let's continue, have a few more pages remaining here. The right understanding results in the human beings achieving the following qualities: self-confidence, respect for human excellence, balance in talent and personality, sociability in behavior, and self-sustainability in occupation. The above can be called as good qualities. Human being becomes social with these qualities. Evidencing the right understanding in living itself is learning. The human being who understands existence can be called as learned, while exploration for getting into coexistential order is innate to every unit of nature. The learning is something which takes place only in the human being. Human being has four activities: knowing, believing, recognizing, and responding. Among these four, the recognizing and responding activities are there in nature apart from human being as well. Everything in nature is recognizing recognizing everything else, and that is how they are responding to one another. An atomic particle too recognizes other atomic particles, which is how they cohabit and work together to evidence conduct of an atom in coexistence. This mutual recognition and response is present from atoms till molecules till planets in the same way. All units of material order, biological order, and animal order also recognize and respond to one another, and thereby they evidence mutual complementariness in the same way. The human being could not be satisfied in the purview of recognizing and responding, and doubts arose in them. The human being has two additional activities, knowing and believing. Human being becomes assured only from their recognizing and responding, only when they're recognizing and responding when they are based on their knowing and believing. Knowing and believing is only of meaning or purpose of everything. Human being can become social in the course of knowing and believing, purpose of everything. In the absence of knowing and believing, one can neither become social nor evidence the coexistential orderliness. One reason behind present wretched human condition is also that their knowing and believing could not happen despite their having its potential. In this state, the human being remains wretched themselves, and they make others also wretched. Human beings have brought the earth to this wretched condition because of their own wretchedness. In my view, we need to sharpen the aspect of knowing and believing in the human being. Every human being needs this sharpness, and it is ever close by. Learning is to evidence the right understanding in the form of living tradition. Jivan's activities can basically be seen in 5 parts. Each of these 5 parts has 2 activities in the state of being and in the state of motion. For example, every Jivan has the want, which is 2 activities, taste and selection. What we select for our taste is the selection activity. And the part of Jivan where these 2 activities happen is called man. The human being hypothesizes in many ways for what all things they may need for their taste, and they have accumulated all kinds of things and are still busy in accumulating more. So far, we have been accumulating things only to taste luxury. The more we lagged in understanding, knowing, and believing the purpose of luxury and possessions, the more helpless we became in their pursuit. We could not find the point of fulfillment of luxury and possession anywhere. The need of the objects of food, shelter, and utilities is to fulfill the practical purpose of nourishment and protection of body. The need of objectives of telecommunication and transportation is to fulfill the purpose of social progress. All these things have become available to the human being, but they could not become satisfied. It is a huge irony. The other 2 activities of Jivan are deliberation and analysis. Jivan performs analysis based on whatever is its level of understanding. All analyses are meant only for recognizing purpose of things. Human purpose is to produce evidence of resolution, prosperity, trust, and coexistential orderliness in their living. The opposite of purposeful living is to keep pursuing enjoyment and indulgence, where human beings won't find any anchor anywhere. So just pausing here briefly. So 4 new words come up at this point. That is recognizing, responding, knowing, and believing. So Nagaraj is saying that everything in nature is performing, recognizing, and responding. So when 2 particles come together, they recognize each other, and they respond to that recognition by cohabiting or participating together in some form of order, whether that's the atom or molecular bond or a chemical bond, or between the seed and the soil, or between the rain and the pavement. Everything is recognizing and responding. It's it's responding according to that recognition. And this is a very, how do I say, this is a very local recognition and response. It is contained to whatever is recognizing and responding. Whereas human being has the potential to know and believe. And this is our specialty, and this refers to having the big picture of things, having the grand understanding of purpose, right? So whereas maybe two particles recognize and respond to each other, human being can recognize and respond in the light of purpose. So if I'm recognizing a relationship, let's say my mother or father, I recognize in the light of a larger picture, how we can participate well in family, how we will participate in the society, and how together through our relationship, mother, father, son, daughter in the family, how together we will participate well for the entire earth, not only family and society, but for the well-being of all. So our recognizing and responding still takes place, but it takes place in the purview of knowing the larger purpose of things. So this is the specialty of human being, which is to be able to see the big picture and act accordingly. You still are living locally, but with a global or with a universal perspective. Whereas the rest of nature is orderly just through the recognition and response process, which is very beautiful. You have a leveling device with the bubble, and the air and the level recognizes the slope, or you put water on the floor and it flows downwards. You can give countless examples as to how nature recognizes and responds, and it's very definite. It can be calculated. It's very, very orderly. Just a quick story. In fact, I have a friend, and her father. He works in optimizing machinery, optimizing factories. So what he does is, from afar, he will say, okay, so tell me, what is the size of this tank, and what is the temperature of that tank, and what is the pressure of fluid in that tank, and how does the tube look like? What size and diameter is it going to the next tank? What is its material? So by gathering all this information, maybe he's in Canada, he's analyzing something in Mexico, he's getting all the dimensions. With all that information, just the dimensions, the diameter, the pressure, the temperature, he can create a full model as to how you can, let's say, optimize the reactions or the transportation or the use of energy in that system. So how is he able to do this? Well, the way is that all the rest of nature is very predictable, very definite. It's governed by the laws of nature. So just by understanding these properties of the chemicals of the liquids and how they interact with the pressure and heat, you can optimize the machine, or you can give suggestions from afar. So it's quite remarkable, and it just attests to the definitiveness of nature. You know how those things will recognize and respond to one another. You can predict how they will recognize and respond, and thus offer suggestion, even without being there. And the same goes for any engineer, chemical engineer. I'm sure it's the same. So that's recognizing and responding, but human being, again, has the one more faculty of knowing and believing. And then he does start to touch on some of the activities of jivan, of life or self-consciousness, as want and selection, and as weighing and analysis. These things I will not go too much into detail, as starting tomorrow, Naomi will be going into detail about all the activities of self, which is incredibly fascinating. So let's continue. We have a couple more pages to go here. The present science concludes that after some time, entire human race will get annihilated and this earth will get destroyed. That is bound to happen if they continue with this thinking. In reality, human beings' emergence on Earth took place only after it had become fully enriched and habitable for human being. Slowly, it offered the opportunity for awakening to the human being who had been living in animal consciousness. Instead of becoming awakened, the human being moved towards consumption and indulgence. It is because of their direction of consumption and indulgence, the human being moved towards endless pursuit of luxury and possession. This earth doesn't have enough material that could fulfill everyone's lust for luxury and possession. This lust will somewhere or the other result in the human being's ruination. Therefore, all things of luxury and possession need to be aligned with the human purpose, i.e., towards nourishment and protection of body and social progress. The alignment of material resources towards social progress leads to creating conditions for participation in undivided society and universal orderliness. As the human being goes about living based on these premises, they become able to realize resolution and prosperity along with happiness and peace. In this way, the aim of Jivan is only to evidence human awakening in existence. Its success is based on the fact that orderly living is every human being's natural expectation. Until there's delusion, the order in humankind is based on fear and temptation. Upon awakening, the order in humankind is based on recognition of values, evaluation, and mutual fulfillment, for which there is a need of development in human understanding. Very beautiful. Nagaraji summarizes this whole section quite nicely towards the end here. So just to clarify, going back on this paragraph, he says that, human being emerged only after this earth became fully enriched. And then there was an opportunity for us to understand this coexistence and to live accordingly. Unfortunately, we have taken a windy path to get there. Here we are understanding, but we took some wrong turns and made some dead ends by going more towards consumption, exploitation of this beautiful earth. But when he says living in animal consciousness, what he means there is basically just living in the purview of body only. So if we live just with the perspective of what is pleasant, what is good, what is healthy for my body, this is called as animal consciousness. Human being has just another potential, which is to actually understand the grand system or order and live at that level, not only being concerned what is healthy or to secure my own body. So that's animal consciousness. Yeah. So basically, human being will not be able to live orderly through fear and reward. Do this, don't do that. It's not acceptable. It won't work for human being. What we need to do is to understand and recognize our relationships with everything. And through this, there's 4 steps, which we spoke previously: recognizing relationships, fulfillment of values, evaluation, and mutual fulfillment. This is also known as living with justice. So justice becomes the key point for human being for living in orderliness. And we all have the desire for orderly living. It's just a matter of kindling that desire and seeing the necessity. So with that, I have completed my section of reading over the last 3 days. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I can say it became progressively easier and more enjoyable as it went on. I was a little bit nervous in the beginning, but it's been a great opportunity and really a great experience, and very helpful for my own progress, as I hope it's been good for yours. I'm not done there. I would like to just share a couple stories about my personal experience meeting A. Nagraj, and the author, or the one who had said this, spoken this, as I have been, it's been suggested. I think it's a great idea. So I'll just take the next 5 minutes or so and share my experience having met A. Nagraj. So I got the opportunity to go to India around six years ago, 2014, for the first time. And okay, I went for the first time, and I really had very little expectations. I did not know what to expect. I heard that Nagraj was a very wise person. You know, he had explored many things, and but I had very limited information. So I got to attend the Sammelan, the annual confluence of coexistential thought when I went. And I got to meet many of you and many more people. And so it's very warm welcoming when I first arrived. And I also met Babaji briefly for the first time there. Afterwards, I went to stay with his family in their home. I got the opportunity for maybe a week or 10 days or so in the beginning. And what I found remarkable, I did not at that point, Nagraj, he must have been 80 or 94, 5, something like that. He was quite elderly, and he passed away just a few years later. So in terms of his physical health, he was towards the end, so most of the day he was in bed, sitting up or lying down, sleeping, and then just very, infrequently getting up to eat or what have you. So so there was very little expression, but I was, trying to be very observant, and I still think with that very little physical expression, so much got communicated, if one was to pay attention. And the first thing that struck me is when I came, here I am, I'm 19 years old, coming from Canada, the other side of the world. I have doubt that, in Nagraj, he grew up in a very different time. When Estelle was reading the first part of the introduction, you can see how very different, even to today's India, how A. Nagraj was living and grew up in a very spiritual, very religious family, where the full day was constructed, around your duties, and everything was a devotion, for attaining God. So it was a very remarkably different upbringing. And here I am, coming from a different generation, but not only different generation, fully different culture, other side of the world, and I'm showing up in his home, in a very remote part of India, not a common or necessarily very well-known place either. So I have doubt how many people of my stereotype he has met, whether he's met another, I know he had, but whether he has met many people, my age, my skin color, my background, my generation, coming from North America. I really had doubt how many people he had met. And so when I arrived to the house, and I sat down, and and everyone was greeting, and he saw that I had arrived. He didn't even blink one eye. There was nothing astonishing to him at all. It was fully normal that I was there. And if I take the opposite scenario, if I'm living with my family in Canada, and someone from the older generation of India, and let's say a sadhu or someone comes and walks into the house, it would be a little bit astonishing, okay, what are you doing here? Who are you? What's going on? And you'd want to, we have this tendency to see people as very different based on the age and skin color and nationality. And of course, India already or Canada is already very multicultural, but I think the village in which Nagraji was living in Amarkantak there's not so much diversity. Pretty much everyone there is from India, right? So I just found it remarkable how here, Nagraji has been talking about, or he's proposing that all human beings are the same, that there's a sameness, similarity, or sameness in all human beings, that we are one race, Earth is one. And these are great things to say, and people have said things similar before in the past, Earth is one, human being is one family. But just saying it is one thing, and really embodying that understanding and perceiving the world that way is something completely different. One can say, yes, we're all one. But as soon as someone walks in from a different part of the world, it's, oh, well, look you're so different, Whereas for Nagraj, I found when I came in, he did not even blink an eye. It was as though a family member had arrived. There was no something extraordinary about me, which I found truly amazing, that not only is he saying Earth is one, is he saying human race is one, but it's truly percolated into his perception, into the way he sees others. It's not just a slogan or reiteration. It is really his perspective. And you cannot fake something so easily like that. Yes, you can become a good actor, but acting has its limitations. There's a certain naturalness to your expression, and that naturalness was very evident. That it wasn't there was no acting there. He was just seeing me as another person, and despite the fact that I'm looking and coming from a very different part of the world. So, that was my initial reaction, and that was very telling. It was not. It's very subtle. In fact, it was nothing, but it was almost that nothing communicated a lot. The fact that there was nothing communicated a great deal to me. So that was the first remarkable thing, and quickly I can share maybe one more. As I said, the interaction was limited. He was mostly sleeping in bed, or not sleeping, but in bed. And what I found interesting was we did have some small discussion, and he was, very, caring to the fact that we were there and making sure we were very well taken care of. And someone one day had brought a new blanket for him. I think we had delivered an electric blanket. I think we brought it from Canada, or someone had brought it for him, an electric blanket, because it was cooler in Amarkantak in the winter, and so they got a cover, a duvet, a sheet for this electric blanket that they had bought from the market, and they brought it and put it on, and Nagraji made some comment about the material. He wanted to check and make sure, is it cotton? Okay, yes. He feels it. Yes. Okay, it's cotton. Good. And secondly, he made some comment about the dyes that might have been used. It was very fluorescent, kind of colored purple and yellow, and he made some comment that perhaps the dyes were chemicals, would not be good, would not be healthy. And I think it caught people off by surprise a little bit. Maybe they knew already that it needed to be cotton, something oil-based polyester or from petroleum would not do. But then he went one step further and found the dyes, that maybe. Now, it's a very simple story, but what I like about this is two things. One is that, despite having some, question about it, raising some concern, he continued to use it. He used the blankets, he was not picky in that way. Some people, if it doesn't fit, fully, they can become very pushing things away, but I think he understood, where he needs to be strict with the value system, and maybe where there was some room for flexibility, maintaining good feelings in the relationship, so he continued to use it. But the other thing which I found remarkable is, someone of his generation, of his age, to be considering these things. I would have never imagined, just maybe today it's becoming a little bit trendy in North America to see, oh, what material is your clothes? Is it something natural? Is it good for your body? Is it good for the environment? What dyes are used to make it? This is something which is just very moderately trendy. It's not that popular. It's not that common to seek out these things. Maybe amongst a few people who are more environmentally conscious, are concerned about health. They would seek out these things, but definitely I would not say of my parents or my grandparents. It was just not in the common. It's not a perspective. There was no perspective to look for those things. It's all new and fancy. The new clothing, and there's no consideration about, is it good for the health or is it good for the environment. So, knowing the background of which A. Nagraj was raised and where he came from, and Estelle read the story in the first sessions, there's no indication that he would get this sort of viewpoint, from that upbringing, and it kind of shows to me the brilliance or the nature of his discovery. How he has discovered and studied through a self-discovery and a study method, the harmony and coexistence, and because again, there's nowhere in the society, at least in North America, nowhere in the society is this idea of, oh, is it good? What material is it? Is it good for the body, my body? Is it good for the planet? Is it good for all? Nowhere in the society does that perspective really exist, especially when it comes down to small things like the clothes that you're wearing, and I know he was always very adamant about getting renewable energy, installing solar, moving away from burning of fossil fuels. So, these things which are now just kind of a little bit becoming trendy today in North America, but very non-existent in the society as a thought. Yet he was carrying these thoughts, and it, for me, it sort of indicates and shows the nature of his discovery, that he's coming from a very different perspective, which is what ensures the well-being of all. It's not a thought which he has found, from reading the newspapers. It's not a thought which has come to him, through something that the society had to offer, but rather it's a thought, it's a perspective, which is a result of his realization and for doing according to the well-being of all. So two, small stories, and there's not much big conversation there, but it does show that your understanding is manifest in all aspects of your living. It's not just in how well you can talk, how well you can give a speech and make people pump them up. It's not about how well about those things. Your understanding gets manifest in every single dimension of your living, from the way that you interact in your family, to the choices that you make around food, to the type of work that you pursue. And so I'm glad to share those couple stories, and I've been very glad to share the last three sessions, 3 days, sharing with you and getting the opportunity to read this wonderful transcript which I think is of great value. So thank you again to Rakeshji for organizing this. Thank you to all those who attended or will attend and watch in the future. Thank you to A. Nagraj for his wonderful work. And we will end it there. Good luck to Naomi, who will continue from here tomorrow. And I hope to see you all again later. Thank you so much. Namaste. Bye-bye.